Welcome to Charity Therapy, a podcast from Birkin Law about building better nonprofits. I'm your host, Jess Birkin.
Hi, Megan. How are you?
I'm good, Jess. How's your day going?
Pretty good. I'm working in my basement. My house is full of insulation contractors. Got to get some moisture out of the roof. So it's an adventure outside today.
Getting banished to your basement for your work day.
Such is the life.
Well, today we're going to cover some listener questions about nonprofits with voting members. But first, Jess, what can you tell us about member-based nonprofits?
Oh, yeah. All right. So this is something that people may or may not know much about, depending on what nonprofits you're involved in, right? So there are three kinds of nonprofits when it comes to members. The first is nonprofits that don't have any at all. They just have beneficiaries or program participants or volunteers or people who engage with them, and membership is not a thing that they worry about. The second group is non-voting member organizations. These are the member groups you pay dues and you get some sort of mission-related benefit, like you belong to the zoo and you get to go to the zoo as many times as you want during the year. You join the art museum, you get to go to the art museum all you want, and maybe you get 5% off at their gift shop, right? That kind of member is something we're pretty familiar with. Then there are the third group, and these are nonprofits that have voting members. Now, these members have certain legal rights that are usually granted by statute, and then the nonprofit can give them more rights. And these are typically like your trade associations, your, heating, cooling contractors trade association, or a lot of churches. Your congregation all vote on who's going to be on the board of elders at your church. So that's kind of a different beast. And I think that's what our questions are about today, right?
Yep. So it's all in that third category. So Jess, are you ready for the first question?
I am so ready.
Let's do it. I am the president of a trade association, and I have a member who's making life difficult for us. She's been upset with the organization for years before I joined the board. She causes a ruckus whenever the organization tries to do anything. Most recently, she's claiming we're violating our board election procedures for our upcoming board elections. This is not true, but she won't give it up. She's repeatedly contacting our grant funders and board members at their homes, claiming that we're breaking the law, and she's going to sue the organization. What do we do? Reasoning with her doesn't seem to work, and I'm concerned that she's going to be disrupting our elections.
Oh, boy. Yeah, this is tough. Kind of reading between the lines here, it sounds like this member may have mental health challenges. Most people aren't that aggressive for no reason for that long repeatedly. So I'm going to go out on a limb and just say this person may be struggling with some mental health stuff. And what do you do with that? It's just really hard. The best strategy when somebody is sort of not acting normal is often to just not engage with them. But if it's your member, that's not always possible, right? And that is the struggle here. So there are a couple of possible options that come to mind. One is, they're both harsh options, I guess. So the first harsh option is you could theoretically remove this member. You could terminate their membership. Often your bylaws will have a procedure for terminating a membership, and typically your state law will have some sort of statute on point. In Minnesota, we have a really good nonprofit statute, and so it's very specific about what you do to remove a voting member here in Minnesota. Other states, their statutes are a little light on this. So if you're in a state where your statute is not super clear or your bylaws aren't clear and haven't accounted for this eventuality, the important best practices are to know, you need to give this person notice and an opportunity to be heard. And that doesn't mean that you have to have a trial. It just means that you need to tell them that they're being removed and invite them to respond if they want to. And that can be in writing. it doesn't necessarily have to be in person. So that would be a best practice, is to give them a couple weeks heads up and an opportunity to respond. Now, depending on the financial means of this person, it is possible that they could bring some sort of court action about their removal. In my experience, that's pretty unlikely, but it is just something to be aware of. If in a voting member organization, voting members tend to have more legal rights. And so there could be some sort of grounds. So that said, that sounds super scary. And obviously, if you were doing that, you'd probably want to get legal advice before you move forward with it. But that is an option. Now, I'll just put a caveat on there. Some voting member organizations, you just can't do this because by the person just existing, they have rights. So like a neighborhood association where everybody that lives in the neighborhood, or a homeowners association, you're just stuck with this person. So that leads me to option number 2, which is if this person's behavior really, they say they're contacting people at their home and it's getting really aggressive. If this person's behavior rises to the level of something that you could get a harassment restraining order or an order for protection or whatever it's called in your state, one of the people who's being harassed by this member could actually possibly seek a restraining order. An organization can't get a restraining order. That's not a thing usually. It's connected to an individual. So that restraining order would run with the individual person. And usually, depending on the law in your state, it can be for a good long while, right? Like it could be for up to 2 years that this person can't be anywhere near you. And the way that these orders work is generally that the person can't be within, say, 300 feet of the person with the protective order, which means effectively this person that's bothering you, they'll still be a member, but they won't be able to come to any of your meetings. They won't be able to contact this person. And so it can really cut down on the amount of interaction that your organization is going to have. It's only a partial solution because it doesn't really stop everything. It just stops them from contacting this person. But that can be, if you really need to, that can be a good solution to sort of get somebody out of your hair when you don't have other good options like removal. But ultimately, I just want to make sure that I do say the listener says they are following their election procedures. And I will just say, having worked with lots of groups, sometimes we aren't following the procedure. And sometimes the bylaws aren't really clear. And sometimes the person who's causing a big ruckus is sort of monkeying around with the fact that it's not clear or we haven't really been following our bylaws. And so, it's worth taking a look at the bylaws and just making sure that we really are following what it says or that we're following what the state law says. And if your bylaws are hard to follow or it's something that you can't or don't want to do going forward, that's a really critical thing for voting member groups because they do have these rights and they can make a stink if you're doing it wrong. So you might want to consider looking at your bylaws, making absolutely sure, getting some legal advice, and then updating your bylaws if they're really convoluted or have a lot of holes in them that create the opportunity for people to pick on you all the time. Of course, I would say get a lawyer to help you with this, but if that's not something that you can do or you don't have an expert near you, this is why I created the DIY bylaws product through Mission Guardian, so you can get yourself a new set and not have to deal with these kind of sticky member complaints. So that's kind of a long answer, but these organizations have so much mess. It's can be really crazy.
Right. Definitely. Big problem. And it means that the solution is not quick and easy either. Okay. I'm going to move on to question number 2. We are a long-standing organization, over 25 years old. Our board recently decided to update our governing documents. We're working on the articles and bylaws revision and realized that we're actually a voting member organization. Oops. With a lot of question marks on the end of that. Problem is, we don't really have members. The way things are written, anybody that volunteered with the organization was considered to be a voting member. It's pretty loose. And to complicate things even more, nobody shows up to our meetings other than the board members. We do host an annual luncheon for our volunteers, which used to be more of an annual meeting, I'm told. We'd like to get rid of the voting member aspect and be a board-only organization. So how do we do that?
Oh boy. All right. So what I love about this question is that it really illustrates how nonprofits change over time, right? This organization's been around for 25 years, and sometimes people get super fixated on tradition or keeping things the same. But as this organization is learning, they have evolved. Their documents just haven't evolved with them. And so just remember, at your organization, the only constant in life is change, right? So this is an interesting one because they don't truly, the way they function, they don't have any kind of members. But legally, since their documents say they do, it would really be a good idea to go through the motions as if their volunteers are still the voting members, because technically they are, even though they haven't been observing any of the process around that. So here's how I would break this down. You would need to have a board meeting, take good minutes, discuss why it's in the best interests of the organization to convert to non-member based organization, and then go through the process of revising the articles and bylaws, change everything over. And this is a big change to your documents, so make sure you get advice for these revisions. And if your documents are more than a decade old, it's probably just a good time to start over. Don't rearrange the chairs on the Titanic, right? Like, just get new stuff. Once you've got that done, the board can review and approve those. But then you're going to have to go have a member meeting and allow your members to vote on this. Because if your state says that their default position for voting members is that they get to vote on changes to the articles and bylaws, you should technically have them vote themselves off the island. It's a weird idea, but it would be the most belt and suspenders, cover your keister way to do this. So you need to put out some sort of communication on your website or whatever, inviting people to a special meeting, and just set out the agenda as a member vote on updating the articles and bylaws that the members need to ratify it. And make sure you provide somewhere on your website, like meeting minutes and the newly revised documents and a little executive summary, so that anybody who actually cares to look can see what's going on. Probably nobody will show up to this member meeting based on the questioner's context. It sounds like it's just going to be the board, and that's okay because technically they would be members and their votes count. So that's fine. And if other people show up, that's fine too. And then basically they would have a member vote and adopt the new documents. And now you are no longer a voting member organization. So it's kind of a lot of procedure to go through, but from a legal perspective, that would be the best way to do it. And, hey, congrats on 25 years of service and best wishes for the next quarter century. You've got new documents.
Neither question gives you a short, easy solution, unfortunately. So Jess, what's your takeaway here about member-based organizations?
Yeah, the thing that strikes me here is voting member orgs just really create a lot of procedure. And as our first person is learning, they really present unique people problems too. Whenever you create members that have legal rights by statute, things can get really complicated. So the takeaway for me is, if you don't need to have voting members, just don't do it. Much of the time, it's not worth the hassle, and the administration and the bureaucracy and the people problems can just take away resources from your time spent on mission delivery. That's pretty much it. Megan, thanks for being here with me today.
Thanks for having me.
As usual, you are a delight. Say, everybody, if you enjoyed this episode, do me a huge favor. Share it with a friend. Rate us, review it, subscribe on your podcast app. It really helps us out. And thank you so much for listening.
All right, folks, that's our show. Be sure to follow me on Instagram or Twitter at Jess Birkin. We want to hear from you. Send us a message at our website, charitytherapy.show. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at birkenlaw.com/signup. Charity Therapy is a production of Birken Law Office, PLLC. Our theme song is by Whalehawk. And remember, folks, this podcast is produced for your entertainment and is not a substitute for actual legal advice.